Nonprofit CEOs are constantly making consequential decisions, often under pressure or in isolation. I'm Adam Jeske, the Nonprofit CEO Advisor, and this is the Nonprofit CEO Podcast, where CEOs talk about the decisions they carry. Today, our guest is Tami Heim, President and CEO of the Christian Leadership Alliance, or CLA. Tami, welcome to the show.
Adam, it is so good to be with you and to be part of this project.
Tell me a story of a consequential decision you've needed to make as the CEO at CLA.
The biggest one that comes to mind was this incredible pivot point where we were having great momentum at Christian Leadership Alliance. Everything was just flourishing in the way that you would want it to. And we had great momentum. And we were heading into our 2020 conference. And it was to be held early in May. And everything changed on March 12th as I sat in this very chair and got a call that the governor had shut down Texas, and there was nothing, no other option that I could comprehend or think of, but God made a way and a big decision had to be made, and it literally changed the trajectory of the ministry.
And what went through your head at that moment? The news hits, and did you start solving immediately? Did you go into options? Did you just put your head down in despair?
Well, it was interesting because the morning of March 12th, I was having a call with the hotel, and we had a 2-hour protocol call where they were saying, well, because this is out there, this is what we need to do. And candidly, it was a bit overwhelming. I had no idea that we were going to have to go through that attendees were going to have to go through that because it was all so new. I mean, this is March 12th. And after it was over, I was just processing all of that. And then I got the news that they had shut down, which meant that there could be no gatherings of more than 50 people. So it was phase one. And I realized that that meant we can't have this conference. And so I'm sitting here understanding that in that moment in time, the ministry is completely bankrupt because of the way, funds flow and getting ready for this, and the costs were all sunk. And the first thing I did was call our legal counsel at Taft, John Wiley, and I said, I don't know how this next step is. Clearly, we can't have this conference, but I can't declare that because we have contractual agreements that would have made us liable for another $1.5 million if not handled correctly. So I praise God that there was the sanity of mind to make that call first. And as he was doing what he would do and was just helping prepare to walk through that, I remember just sitting here and saying, this is beyond anything that I've ever experienced or know. And God, I'm not even going to cry out to you and ask why. But what must I do to navigate this extremely volatile and tender time? And I may add that it came after that momentum we were having. We actually changed the vision statement of Christian Leadership Alliance at our fall retreat. And the change was the vision was every Christian leader thriving. And it came so fast, and I was struck by every Christian leader thriving, and then this help. And I was just like, Lord, what do I do? And how does this fit into the context of this new vision that you gave us? And now the world is disrupted. What do you need from it? Like, what do we do? I do not know the next step for anything like this. And you have to make the way.
Sketch out for us some of the timing of March 12th until letting participants know, talking to the venue. Like, give me more of that story.
Well, the call with the venue was like a 9:00 call. And again, we were going through talking about some of the added procedures that we would need to employ to ensure that we had a safe environment for our attendees. And after that call, it was probably an hour later that I received the news that they had closed down public gatherings. I sat here probably for about 30 minutes, and the first thing I was inclined to do was just to call for legal counsel first. Before I even contacted the board, it's like knowing the contract and the way out. And surely this was an act of God, right? Or that there was a way out of this. And I knew that I needed to understand that first before I could even go to the board and talk about the impact of what was happening. And while that was taking place, because of the board meeting we had and the momentum we were having, I was spending a lot of time understanding what a fully loaded tech stack would look to help fuel the growth and support the organization. So I've been working on that for almost a year and a half. And I get a call from the person that I was working with, and he said, "Tami, I just checked, and your conference isn't canceled." And I'm like, "Well, all of this is just happening today. And I have some things that I need to do, but we will not be holding it." And he said he just came out of a board meeting and found out that the platform that we were looking at and wanting to get for Christian Leadership Alliance could be converted to a digital platform to host a conference. And I said, "Oh my," and he said, "And because I've been working with you all this time, and because we were meeting weekly just to go on the back end and learn how things were set up, and I'm trying to process how we would embrace this." And he said, "And if you will do it with us to build this, we'll gift it to you, no charge, to run your event." And immediately it was as if God rushed in with a possible solution. So I said, "All right, let me process that." But I was still waiting to hear back from our lawyer. And he gave me all the right things that I needed to do so that I could follow and take care of that. And then I needed to communicate with the board about the outcome and just to ask them to pray. And so they gave me space of another day. It would take at least that long to officially declare that we're not going to have there, and then do the communication plan to let people know. But I didn't want to communicate one thing and then something else would happen because of what I had just learned. I knew the communication would be different. So it was probably like 24 hours that it came together.
Wow.
So I understood the assignment. And the next big thing was to say to the board, "Here's what we think is possible," and seeking their trust for me to just navigate through that. And they were very supportive. And they said, "Well, see what you can find out and then report back on what you think the plan of action is." And so they were patient enough in that crisis to give me space. But the big assignment was, how do you take all those attendees? And it was like an unprecedented number of people planning to attend. How do you take all of that faculty? Because we have over 100 faculty. How do you move keynote speakers? And what do you do with your exhibitors and sponsors that would compel them to move forward in this? Now, you have to remember, they were going through this same crisis too, because all of a sudden, this is their income plan. This is their ministry. I mean, everyone is in huge disarray and trying to figure it out. But I felt very compelled that this was what God had planned, and that out of any time that we would have ever had a breakthrough like this, only God would plan it at a time when we change a mission statement to "Every Christian Leader Thriving," and we had an opportunity to bring the Christian community together to encourage them and to have a front row seat to what does thriving look like under great duress. So it felt very ordained by God to do it, to make that shift.
Was there a moment when everything was up in the air and you saw the decision coming into focus, and it was the critical go, no go, or cancel, don't cancel, or shift online versus just somehow cancel and hope to negotiate out of some of the financial commitments that had been made, the sunk costs? What was the critical moment of this decision process?
Well, the first thing that had to happen is obviously the board was supportive. The critical moment is now I have a team that, do they even have a job? What does this mean to them? And it was a conversation that pretty much talked about there's a lot going on that we don't know and we can't understand. We believe God's made a way for us. And if in this time of crisis, this was the very last thing we could ever do as Christian Leadership Alliance, and if we could bring hope, equip, training, and unity among people in great stress, what a glorious way and gift to be our final gift. And they were at a place too, I think very much the same. Well, what else is there? I mean, we're ready to go with it. But I think getting that alignment and then getting the green light to go ahead and begin the process of communicating with our speakers and our talent and our worship. I mean, all the things that go into a conference, and to say, would you take this journey with us? And what it would require to do that. And we did things like, if you had a ticket to the Outcomes Conference, it now counts for 7. So now you can bring 7 people online to this experience. And remember, Adam, this is before anybody was doing any kind of an online conference. I mean, we were right at the head. Now, several months later, that was all we were seeing, right? And that was what all the invitations looked like. But this was leading out on that.
March 12th, that week, very early for that, a pivot for an organization and an event of your size, for sure.
We learned so much in that, right? We learned so much about that. And I could remember big disruption, like when I was president of Borders, and there were a lot of things that happened. There were the war in Iraq, 9/11. I mean, there were a lot of things there. And even in my days in department store retail, because there were mergers and acquisitions, but I had a boss that said, T. Heim, he always called me that because he didn't like Tami. Didn't think sounded professional if you go T. Heim. Everything we learned in kindergarten. And when things are tough, we hold hands and stick together. And that was resonating in my mind, just that truth. And I thought, we have an opportunity to bring together Christian nonprofit ministries, and we can hold hands and stick together in this. And you can imagine people were online and it was very raw for a lot of people. And you could see varying levels of thriving, great confidence and, okay, we're working to figure this out. But knowing that you're not alone was huge, and that we were coming together, we were praying together, and we were being together in the way with technology that only God had made possible in our time and trusted to us in the time of this crisis. So it's very remarkable when I think about it. And then the fact that after we did it, then God said, take it global. And in that board meeting in October, when we changed it, we said, and maybe by 2025, we would be able to take some of the things that we're doing to countries outside of the United States. And God made that happen in 30 days after we finished this in the United States. And that was a miracle upon miracle too, because when he called us, or when it was clear, I went to a meeting and I walked out of this meeting and I said, we have to do this. I slept for 16 hours. I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. Like utter empty humility. God, you've got to do this. And he put someone in my inbox that was catalytic for that to begin. And in 30 days, we had 10 global partners. And we started
Wild.
training people all over. I'd have to say, the one thing that moved me most is we got an email from a pastor, a Palestinian Christian who was pastoring a church in Bethlehem. And he said, we are spreading the gospel along the West Banks to Muslims, and we're caring for Syrian refugees. We can never leave here. There is no way for us to ever leave this country. And I'm in the basement of our church with our team. And you need to know that we're watching this, and we've never experienced anything like this. He goes, you are water in our desert. And I got that and I thought, that's enough. That's enough right there. That's worth it all.
It's amazing to see some of the good and beautiful coming out of what was such a ridiculous time and lots of
Yes.
devastation and pain and confusion.
Yeah, it was.
When you were in that season, you've mentioned talking to board members and legal counsel and eventually vendors and participants. Were you talking to anyone else who runs large events or ministry leaders and what they were seeing? Did you have any outlet for that kind of conversation?
It was all so fast, I didn't. I mean, it because it was new. It like I said, it wasn't like you'd open a playbook, you could Google, like, how do you do I mean, there wasn't anything to set a precedent or someone to talk to at that time. It was more asking the good questions. It's asking the exhibitors, "If you move on to this site, would you be willing to open a Zoom room for this hour to this hour and people could come visit you?" Thinking that a lot of the services and things that they were providing would probably be even more relevant, and working with ministries to figure, okay, like, how are you going to recover from this? And I really feel that in that time, God was leading the way. And so we were just praying and seeking Him and trusting. And I think I was so amazed that every keynote speaker said, "Yeah, I'll record it." Our hosts at the time, they were recorded and then they were live, so we could mix it up and control it. But they did things like they would even wear the set, like the speaker maybe recorded that at home, but when they would come on live, because after they would do their keynote speech, we have kind of a practice of we love to process with the keynote, ask questions and go a little bit deeper. And they would come online. And some of them would remember to wear what they wore I mean, they were working hard to create an experience that wouldn't be distracting. And we were releasing the workshops and the training in real time. So it wasn't like they could go anywhere. It was like at this hour, this is airing. And so we went through and we were using Slack. We were going back and forth and managing all of that. But there really wasn't a place to go, and candidly didn't feel like there was a time. There was time to do it. We really needed to be about pulling it all together. And I would go in that time, like when it was the Zoom room time for our vendors, and I would just go click on their links because we had them. And I went into those rooms, and there were times when they were really trying to encourage people. There were times they were really problem solving. And then I would go in and they would be in prayer. So they were at work and they were like, "Are you checking up us?" I said, "No, I'm just interested." And if there wasn't someone in the Zoom room, it gave me this beautiful opportunity just to personally connect with them about being part of this and to find out how they were doing and to pray for them and uh, be an encouragement. And since that all happened, we've trained over 11,000 leaders in over 100 countries using that platform.
Tammy, tell me a little bit more about the areas of the CEO role that produce the most difficult decisions. Where do you see CEOs getting hung up where they have to make a call and it's just a really hard one?
Well, first of all, I would say a CEO should never be independent of their board. So a strong board is very important, and a board that can collaborate and work together on it. A board that's willing to be into something even when it's the hard time to be into something. It's easy to be a board member when things go well, but that they are really staying on top of anticipating the things that are happening and that there's a good relationship. I think the relationship between a CEO and their board is really the ultimate game changer. If there's a high level of trust there, things definitely can move at a much faster space, which means that the board needs its development and there is an investment that needs to be made to make sure that they're on top of things. I mean, even in our last board meeting, we went through and said, okay, here's a list of topics that are not in the board policy manual, but based on the way the world's changing, we need to start thinking deeply about and probably developing policies to support them. And so when there's a fraction between a CEO and the board, that causes great duress. Obviously, we talked a little bit about just the funding of it, making priorities. It's always difficult to make cuts and to adjust things, but sometimes it's the pruning process.
Tami, what do you wish somebody had told you before you were the CEO at the Christian Leadership Alliance?
I think because my background had been so corporate oriented, I think, like many, when you step into something that you think will be pure ministry, that somehow you feel like people will get along well, that things will go as they need to be. But actually, I wish someone had said, Tami, you're stepping on a battleground and it's not flesh and blood. It's really, you have to be so discerning about what it is, and you need to really lean on God even more than you would have. And again, business was ministry to me during those years, but just understanding the depth of the spiritual battle, because now you're claiming kingdom territory, and it's not flesh and blood anymore. It's not Wall Street. It's really, you have to be, what is it they say? You have to be prayed of.
Tami Heim, President and CEO of the Christian Leadership Alliance. What do you love about your work?
Oh, there is so much joy in creating the places and spaces where leaders can come together and invest their very best in each other. Like every day I say, I get to do this. Because I remember the first time I walked into a CLA conference, and I stood there and I was so amazed because I came out of it. I mean, I was in book publishing, and so I was familiar with a lot of these different ministries, but it was like I was seeing the weep and the warp of the master plan of redemption. I was seeing people that were out there and they were meeting so many people at their different points of needs, taking care of those needs, but then giving them the hope of the gospel. And God in 2026 really revealed that to me through a chronological Bible study in 1 Corinthians 12:4-7. Lots of different gifts, but God's in them. A lot of different activities, God's in it. It's this beautiful expression where Paul's talking about the body. 11 is about order. Then you get this, and then of course we go into the love chapter in 13. But what I loved about it is that there is this great diversity that brings great unity because the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the good of all. And looking at the body and bringing people together so that they can share and exchange what God is doing in their ministries, what they're learning, so that they might go and be able to apply those principles. And that's what we're celebrating this year. It's our 50th anniversary. And there were 20 people that gathered in a room, bringing their best practices and believing that we would be stronger together if we would stick together. And that everything that was happening at the time in the 70s that would be like ministries falling or all that messy stuff, they were saying, we are called to something higher. And then out of that gathering, not too long, then you had ECFA saying, and we need to measure it. And then years later, then Best Christian Workplace, and we need to have flourishing cultures. And we need to take care of our people. And seeing the evolution of those things come out of the alliance. And the thing that makes me so happy is when I see two leaders meet that probably have never met before, and you can see their intents in the exchange. I love that. And then I get to sit back and go, oh, now I'm seeing the outcome of that conversation, making a difference in the world.
Tami, thank you for joining us on the Nonprofit CEO podcast.
Well, it was a delight to be here, and I'm cheering you on in this effort because I think it's so needed. And this is a way that you are creating a space for leaders to come and invest their best in each other. So thank you for doing that.
For everyone listening, if you know a nonprofit CEO who's carrying something significant, send them this episode. Tell them about the Outcomes Conference from the Christian Leadership Alliance. And if you want more of the patterns I'm seeing across hundreds of CEO conversations delivered weekly, you need the Nonprofit CEO Briefing. That's at nonprofitceo.com. I'm Adam Jeske, the Nonprofit CEO Advisor. Thanks for what you're leading.